Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our Recovery Business Association webinar. We have a special guest today, Matthew Clune, who I've known for many years, who's worked with SAMHSA previously and has helped me on many grants, which I'm appreciative for. But Matt is working today with SAFE Project. You are the Senior Director, and you're going to be talking with us today about how to create a recovery responsive workplace culture. Is that right, Matt?
That's right. Yeah. Well, I'm going to do my best at
that. And we have Peter Brunzell, who is the founder of RBA, and he's going to be doing the interviewing.
Hello.
Peter.
Yeah. So we'll just jump right in, and we just have a few questions for you today, Matt.
Sounds great. Yeah.
Some of the key things as far as employers, as far as destigmatizing addiction in the workplace, and just what are some of the key things that you think about what an employer can do to start that process?
Sure. Thanks, Peter, and Shannon for the nice introduction. That's an excellent question. So I think for most employers, they're not, I need to remind myself, they don't work in the world that we work in. They're not inundated with facts and figures about substance use and its prevalence and the good things that manifest from recovery. And so just basic training, the way we approach it at SAFE is like any good social science work, we do kind of a baseline. And we do an assessment of the workplace and try to get a sense of where is the company at in terms of their knowledge base around issues of substance use, addiction, and recovery, and then produce kind of a profile for them. From which we can develop a training package that would, for example, concretely here, train supervisors on how do they deal with an employee who keeps showing up late for work and doesn't show at all on Mondays and makes frequent trips to the bathroom, with some questionable circumstances, and how do they deal with that? But as I hear myself talk, this is not a one size fits all proposition. So the training includes things like Addiction 101. What's the nature and science of addiction? And I think the more that we educate folks in the workplace around the nature of addiction and substance misuse and recovery, the more informed they'll be, and the greater shot we have at breaking that block of stigma. This is the hope anyway. This is what we've seen happen in other organizations that work closer to the healthcare field, for example. Another thing that SAFE does towards this end is we use signage. We try to dispel that. Seems to be there seems to be the prevalence of this understanding in the U.S. that somehow issues of behavioral health, things that happen above the neck, are different than issues that impact us physically, like other chronic illnesses like asthma or diabetes, when they're precisely the same, as I know you well know. And so how do we bring lay people along so that they can better understand that, in learning just kind of like the top line of the science, that these are that the head's connected to the rest of the body, and we should be looking at these illnesses no differently. So I think I'll stop there before I say too much, but certainly open to,
Okay.
yeah.
You started with assessment as far as just an overview of looking at what's going on with the organization. You started there, moving into kind of how you would outline that as time went on, but obviously introducing the 101 of what is substance use, mental health, how are those portraying themselves in the workplace. And like you said, a lot of people who don't work in the field aren't often thinking about this. There's a job at hand. If you're an HR person, you're thinking about possibly hiring people, keeping them hired, how to get them trained, how to onboard them. But the rest of these pieces are kind of nuanced in a way, because it's been looked at as an issue from the neck up and down. Like, we've separated some of that in our society. So it's become a nuanced area, as much as you wouldn't think it is. And but it has become one.
Exactly. And how do we debunk the myths? How do we break through the how do we break through the myth that substance use is somehow a moral failing? It's tough work, but I know you guys are in the business of demystifying also, and it seems like it's a one step at a time proposition.
It really is.
One thing I said very quickly earlier, and I just want to return to, because I didn't put some closure on it, is one of the pieces of the package that we use that is kind of like low hanging fruit to me, is if we can get companies to put up signage. SAFE has developed some pretty good signage that that says things like, addiction is a disease, or please talk to your health provider about if you're experiencing X, Y, and Z, just to try to raise awareness and people's mindfulness. So anyway,
Yeah, it's a good connecting point and beginning that process. And so one of the things that kind of leads into is if somebody has having an issue and their fear of their job and actually opening up about it at work to somebody in management or HR, there could be potentially in their policy some sort of retribution that might come back on this person if they open up about it. What's your suggestion for the people that are experiencing that in the workplace and afraid to open up about it?
yes. So you want guidance to the employee who's afraid to open up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent question. I don't mind, disclosing that I'm in long-term recovery, and when I got into recovery, you most definitely did not talk to your employer about being in recovery or needing help, and that kind of thing. I'm happy to say that we've made some progress in that area, and I know both of our organizations are working at making increasing progress in that area, but it still needs to be weighed by the individual on a case-by-case basis. So I think most fundamentally, the individual needs to look at what's available in their health policy, their health insurance policy. Hopefully they have a health insurance policy. And if treatment is supported within their health insurance policy, well, first let me back up a step, get a diagnosis, because we're not experts at, how bad our problems are, especially when we're in the depths of addiction. So if you can get yourself or a loved one to a diagnostician who can recommend whether you need long-term treatment, residential, or outpatient, that's a good starting point. and along those lines, some consideration about whether I can continue my work while I'm addressing this health issue, right? If I need to, if I can't, and I need to go to a residential treatment program or a 28-day rehab, then I would advise the individual to talk to their HR representatives. Hopefully there's a employee assistance program in that organization. They are precisely there for this purpose. They are trained up and informed about how to address just these issues, and also work as kind of intermediaries between your supervisor, HR, the treatment provider, so that your job is secure if you're taking the right steps to address your health issue. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. It kind of leads into where I was heading next too, is as far as people seeking treatment and what to do next. And you mentioned for them to reach out to their healthcare provider, or to now I'm blanking, the employee assistance programs, or if they have RBA on board, they could reach out to us too. But employee assistance programs are right there. They're trained for this, and being able to connect them back with some sort of service right there. Do your posters have that on there too? Because that would be, that's not a bad idea of who to reach out to.
So I'm in the middle. Yes. So I'm in great point. I'm in the middle of mocking up a poster that I'd like to use with everyone we speak to. That gives kind of a treatment locator, provides localized on the ground, organizations to reach out to. Some of them might be family support organizations. Some of them might be recovery support, which we didn't really hit on in the prior question, but I'm happy to circle back to, because it's equally as important. And so, yeah, so who are your local resources? How can you lean on them? And just providing that there's an enormous amount of disinformation out there, or just total lack of information. And if nothing else, we can provide that.
That's awesome. I've noticed that too. Like sometimes if you search on Google, just that alone, it can get pretty dicey because you're redirected in many different ways that aren't entirely accurate. Is that what you experience as well?
Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why I think the signage, or it doesn't have to be signage, but some other technical support is needed, because if you search on Google, you'll come up with, as you know, you'll come up with people marketing their treatment programs. You'll come up with some locators that are better than others. So we like to kind of point people in the right direction, where we know they can get the best guidance during a very sensitive and emotional, troubling, challenging period of their life and the family's life.
As far as internal cultural organizations, is there any suggestions you'd have just in general that you mentioned a few of them, but is there any specific ones that you'd mention that you could mention as far as what people can do internally to open that door to knowing that they're responsive towards this and they're open towards it? Is there anything that you can suggest?
Yeah, another terrific question. There's a couple things that come to mind. I said I wanted to circle back to recovery, and so this is maybe a good opportunity to do that. So when I hear your question, Peter, what I'm really hearing is, how do we norm this idea that addiction is a thing? It happens in the workplace. 75% of those who self-report, not even the ones in denial. The ones who fully acknowledge that they have substance use disorders are employed. So they're in our workplace. So just like getting, CEOs and other senior leaders to recognize that, this is not a problem in some foreign land, guys or gals. This is a problem right there in your own workplace. How do we, what are some things we can do to get your staff to recognize all of what we said earlier about stigma, and that addiction is an illness, and kind of norm that thinking around that, but that recovery should be, we used to say recovery is possible, and thankfully we've shifted to, recovery is probable if one lines up the right resources. So concretely, what can you do in the workplace? I have some suggestions around. I think the training's important, or sharing information about the nature of the illness and the nature of recovery. Towards the connecting the dot between your last question and the one earlier about how would I advise someone who's seeking help for treatment. Well, the further kind of a continuation of that advice is, what pointers would I give them when they return to the workplace, and what guidance would I give the employer for the person who's returning to the workplace? There's a whole lot in that, right? And there's a whole lot of cultural meat in that question and how we look at it. I want to use a little example, I think, here that illustrates the point that I'm trying to make, which I think is really cool and makes me enormously hopeful about how organizations can wrestle this issue. So there is a program which you may be familiar with up in the Philadelphia area called TTAP. And you're familiar? I'm just see you nodding head. So for those of you who don't know, this is a program that I just learned about a couple of years ago that grew organically, where guys in the construction industry, normally guys, don't mean to be sexist here, in the trades, who have been drinking their lunch or had had injured themselves and gotten addicted to opioids, and found their way into recovery, would be on the job and notice the guy or gal next to them was nodding out or not showing up on Monday or drinking their lunch, and would just kind of pull them aside, as we know so often happens in recovery, and say, everything all right with you? I go to this, I meet with this group of people at 7 o'clock every night. You want to come down with me after work? And so from this very informal peer-to-peer with small p's, grew this larger formalized program where the unions recognized, we've got something here. We've got construction, ranks at the very top of industries impacted by substance use, and here we've got men and women just willing to give of themselves to help their coworker. So let's formalize it. Let's call them peer advocates. We won't take away their jobs because they make a hell of a lot more in their union paying jobs, right? But they're willing to step up to the plate and do that. And we'll provide them with a little bit more training and structure around all of that. And so there's an example of where, recovery is almost in the air within those workplaces. So I'm looking at the clock here, and I don't want to, I could go a little further. Should I punctuate that point?
Yeah, punctuate. I was curious. So just organically, it came about as far as that peer-to-peer connection within the workforce and really helping to, obviously that stabilizes and incentivizes people to go to work when you have that support right there from your fellow workers. It's right there. It's right next to you. But that changes that entire environment and culture, and that's
Right.
the objective. So that's quite an amazing story, and I loved hearing that one when I first heard it too. Um, is there ways, and so is there ways that you can see organizations doing that, instead of it's not always grassroots or organic like that? How would they institute that otherwise?
Yes, thank you. Because your question, Peter, helps me connect the dots between my little anecdote and where I was going with what do we do with the worker who comes back to the workplace newly in recovery. And um, so I've observed, and I would also recommend, because this is a very, very new and emerging area, I think, within workplaces. And I don't pretend to have the right answer on this, because I think the jury's still out. But I've seen workplaces use, through like the wellness lens, um, uh, wellness coaches. I've seen some organizations use peers, peer recovery support specialists, as you and I would recognize them. I've seen them use recovery ambassadors or recovery allies. So those people coming back to the workplace who've gotten a year or two under their belt, who are willing to be, who are not going, are going to continue in their jobs, but are willing to be tapped if needed to provide support or advice, or the, hey, there's a meeting, that meets at 5 kind of thing. I think that's a play that's a, through all of those strategies, we may achieve the kind of enculturation of recovery that we're looking for in the workplace, and
And that
others. Yeah,
and that's where a place like Safe Project comes in, or Recovery Business Association, or collaboration of different organizations to bring that support into organizations that are maybe not as clear on how to start that process. Is that right?
absolutely. Like, if you were, I don't know, pick your company, if you're running H&R Block, or how would you possibly where would you go for advice about how to start something like this up, how to kind of like plant the seeds and germinate them.
Mhm.
And so I think, thankfully, a couple things come to mind. The Biden administration has made all of these concepts that we're talking about, as you know, a top priority of the new administration, creating recovery-ready workplaces. What does that mean? Well, it means that, the best thinkers in the country and government have recognized that, I think my point earlier, that 75% of those who say they have substance use disorder work. And so, what are we going to do about that? And they recognize that there needs to be safe passage for them who willingly, or with a little nudging from their workplace, seek treatment. And then there needs to be, further still, support for them when they come back to the workplace and are vulnerable and in early recovery. And what should businesses do about that? And that's where corporations like yours and Safe Project and others come in, because we can help inform this process and kind of move this administration's priority along.
And our priority, I would imagine. That's why we're doing the work.
Absolutely. I'm sorry. Yeah, we're not doing. um, I feel like this is something we've been trying to do for a while, and it's manna from heaven that we have an administration that has kind of like heard our call.
Yep, I think that we're definitely opening the doors here as far as workplaces go, and how to engage that. One of the things that I've said quite often is I don't know your vision around this, Matt, but I see it in the sense, the concept of a cultural shift in the workplace makes such a huge difference that I think that it's not even estimatable at this point of how it would impact our community. Because if every employer had this in place, every single one across the board in the entire nation, and people are being approached and supported, how would that shift the culture? How would that impact the
It's
culture?
just, yeah, I mean, you know, I often say this, I don't mind putting out there that I think I might have said this to you when we first met. I mean, I don't mind acknowledging that all these years I've been working in treatment programs, with recovery support programs, and then, you know, at a governmental level supporting them. I never thought about the workplace. And it was kind of like a, um, this, we're being taped, right? It was kind of an duh moment. Like we have a, why do we as a culture wait until people hit bottom or get locked up or get hospitalized before we start taking their addiction issues seriously? Why not address it where we have a captive audience, so to speak, within the workplace? And so, uh, so to respond to your point, talk about the sea change in our culture. If we could get organizations to kind of think right about this whole issue, give them the tools that they need, and I just can't even imagine. I mean, you know, I realize in pitching some of this stuff, I always, one of the things I say to corporations, and I'm guessing you do as well, is, well, I don't say this out loud, but I think, you know, even if they're not good corporate citizens and they, you know, they fully haven't drank the Kool-Aid yet. We can show them ways that have been documented by research scientists that about just how many millions of dollars each business will save by doing the right thing. And then if we get them to take a bite, you know, simply because they're going to save money, I'd like to believe they'll come around on the other issues as well.
I would hope so. I would hope so. Well, that's our time today, Matt. I wanted to thank you for joining us. We have Matt today, the Senior Director of Safe Workplaces with Safe Project. I'm Peter Brenzel, the Executive Director of Recovery Business Association. I want to thank you all for joining us today.
Pleasure was mine,
Thank
by the way.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye now.